After much delay, I'm finally back with Volume 3 of Surreal and Aesthetic Doom mods. Apologies for the wait, I got kinda sidetracked with other videos I wanted to make, and ultimately, I felt like forcing a part 3 right away when I wasn't really feeling it would result in a pretty mediocre video. I'm happy to be back now, though, and I have a lot of cool projects to show off. For anyone unfamiliar with the series, I showcase a variety of mods for Doom that are either particularly visually interesting or dabble in surrealist and unconventional art styles. I don't think much more needs explaining, so with that said, let's get into it. This is a hell of a wad to start off with. Brought to us by the duo of Plurb and Psy, VP Voyage is a giant 12-level journey through bizarre maps inspired by early 90s 3D renders. You can feel that influence immediately in the first map. It's a slow, combat-free walk through a forest, with a sky lit up with stars that look like they were pulled straight from the original Space Jam website. You climb up into a cute little apartment before opening up the gate to the forest. Following the distant glow of lights on the top of giant towers in the distance, guiding me towards something strange on the horizon, all while this beautiful MIDI track plays in the background. It does so much to establish the mood and warm you up for the experience. This beam of light slowly lowering down from a UFO is a fantastic touch. Don't let it lull you into a false sense of security, though. This WOD is not a casual experience. Well, not on ultraviolence at least. Map 2 is when the combat actually starts, and it opens with a brutal dual Archvile and Revenant setup that took me a solid 10 minutes to figure out. Immediately after this, you get dumped into an encounter with a ton of Revenants and an alternate Cyber Demon with nerfed health, and you'll start to realize pretty quickly that this map set is as beautiful as it is demanding. Before I get too hard into the level design, I want to mention that difficulty options are implemented pretty thoroughly, and you always have the option to lower it if you want a more tame experience. I started on Ultra Plurbalance for the first 4 maps, and then lowered it to Plurb Me Plenty. I suggest starting on Hey Not Too Plurb if you aren't used to higher difficulty Doom maps, or community made maps in general. With that said, there's something so unique about the approach to combat encounters in this WOD that I absolutely love, despite it often pushing me far beyond my comfort zone. Encounters tend to feel like these individual puzzles that you need to solve. The opening section, for example, has these little cubbies placed just out of view from the Archviles and Revenants, and it gives you a little bit of space to clear out the imps. The Cyber Demon encounter pretty much expects you to herd them away from the elevator and continue on while they infight. Almost every combat encounter has some sort of trick like this. At first, they feel almost impossible, but once you understand what it wants you to do, it feels incredibly rewarding to solve. There's so much attention to detail in fights, and it isn't simply hard for the sake of being mean. It's meant to push you into experimenting until you overcome it. I know some people might be put off by this almost prescriptive style of difficulty, in which combat has specific solutions rather than just letting you do whatever you want, but it's also precisely what makes it such a standout for me. I'm not ashamed to admit that I spent almost an hour on the first map because I feel like I learned a lot about varying my playstyle and what kind of things this WoW expects from me. It was a very good way to warm up after not playing Doom for a while. It also never loses sight of the stellar visual design. The heavily posterized textures with their pastels and neons all complement one another beautifully. Decorations like lamps and switches all have that early 3D shading that almost looks like they're made of clay. Between that and all the abstract architecture, I'm definitely getting vibes from the type of PC game that would come free in a cereal box. It uses PlurbTex, a texture pack by co-author Plurb that has easily become one of my favorites. Map 3 continues throwing quirky and creative fights at me. Of particular note is this setup with the flying archviles circling around you that you can't kill until you activate a crusher later. It's also when the WOD starts dipping into some more slaughter style segments, which are weaved in nicely with other challenges. Conversely, most of Map 4 feels almost like a break by comparison. Most of the encounters here feel a little bit more traditional, and it demonstrates the degree of variety you're going to get here. It's punctuated by a pretty intense slaughter fight with a BFG that really reminded me how bad I am at slaughter maps. I love how it's followed up by a slow, silent walk through some easy platforming in this dark room filled with flickering monitors stacked up to the ceiling. Map 5 is when I switched to Plurb Me Plenty, and I'm happy to say it never felt like the game was trying to baby me. It felt closer to what UV is like on a more regular map set, and I think it's a really solid challenge level. I think this is also where the WOD really starts hitting its stride, and it's one of the high watermarks for the experience for me. I absolutely love the look of this gigantic open space in the beginning. It's really leaning into that DOS jank aesthetic with the sliding door effect here, and the interiors keep that abstract feeling of trying to be a real location, but being far too bizarre and dreamlike to actually make any sense. The setup here in this pit with the spider mastermind in the corner while the Kako demons flood into this tiny room with a damage floor continues to demonstrate how creative and cool the fights are. I don't even want to imagine what this was like on Ultraviolence. There's really only one fight I didn't like, which is this Archvile encounter near the end. The idea is that the Archvile teleports rapidly between points on the star, before stopping on one at random and using its attack. It's a fun idea, and I like it in concept, but in practice, I found that a lot of the time the Archvile would just teleport again while in the middle of the attack, and with nowhere to hide, you kind of just have to hope you get lucky and don't get hit. Even when I did clear it out, it felt kind of more like dumb luck than actual skill, but one frustrating fight is hardly enough to sour the experience for me, and this was still a standout map. Map 6 has a nasty start. The Archvile setup here is mean but fun, and it's not worth trying to kill them until you get the BFG later. This whole WOD absolutely loves Archviles, and you gotta deal with them non-stop. That's probably gonna put a lot of people off from this, but it just gets so creative with how it uses them. It's got some surprisingly forgiving BFG segments in the back half that felt like a huge pressure release after the start. There are tons of Megaspheres and cell pickups here, so as long as you just keep moving, you can kinda completely melt everything. Even the final elevator trap wasn't too rough. Map 7 is a nice break, and it serves as the midpoint of the WOD. It's another calm, atmospheric experience like Map 1. There's some light puzzle solving and platforming here. It's a much needed break before the final few maps. The work Plurb and Psy have done here is absolutely fantastic, and the work that they put in to make it accessible through lower difficulties really shows a commitment to onboarding new Doomers who might be a little bit nervous about trying harder stuff. I played a bit of the first few maps on the easiest difficulty, and even that felt like it would be a pretty rewarding but fair challenge if you were used to more vanilla style stuff. I feel like I can recommend this to pretty much anybody, and if what you see here interests you, I absolutely encourage you to go see the rest of it on your own. If you're not in the mood for a challenge, here's something on the opposite end of the spectrum. Disco Metro is a no monsters map made by Livin' Dead as a gift to a friend, and it's a simple walk through a city made up almost entirely of solid color geometry. It's a gorgeous little experience and one of those hidden gems that ends up going under the radar for a lot of people. The general aesthetics of the map, with all the bold, flat neon colors contrasted against the gray and black urban canvas, are absolutely gorgeous. There are so many little areas to explore and appreciate. The view of the water is nice, and you'll occasionally catch sight of a train passing by. The central area has a skyscraper with strobing blue stairs and a fountain out front. Probably my favorite part is the art museum. You can wander around looking at paintings while listening to an absolutely killer MIDI jazz track. One of the elevator doors is open, and it leads into a bizarre walk through pink and blue stone paths floating in space, ending with this cabin area that left me stunned. It only takes about 10 minutes to explore the whole map, and it's such a treat to experience. Definitely firmly in the interactive art piece category, and it excels at doing that very well. As far as this channel is concerned, the Broken Lamp Records crew are doom mapping royalty. Various works by associated members have been included in this and prior videos, and will inevitably make it into future parts of the series as well. Surreal and aesthetic doom mods are kind of their entire thing, and they collectively make up some of the best talent modern doom mapping has to offer. So what happens when you get them all together to make a bunch of maps for each other? Something equally as good as it is bizarre. This thing is a grab bag of 17 maps that all range wildly in style and difficulty, from slaughter to classic to puzzle and platforming. There's basically no visual motif or gameplay subgenre left untouched here, and not all of it is going to suit your tastes. Map 1, Cradles of Civilization, is a gigantic, sprawling adventure through a hellish abyss. It almost feels like something out of a Lovecraft story. It starts out pretty simple as you ascend up a fleshy spire, facing off against increasingly brutal encounters. It's capped off with a great cyber demon fight. As I head for the portal, I expect it to be the exit, but it's really only the end of the first of 3 acts. Part 2 of the map opens up with a gigantic castle courtyard in hell, with every type of demon you can imagine infighting across a river of blood. One nice thing about this map is that it pretty much never locks you out of backtracking, so you end up being able to grab items you left behind, and I was never too starved for ammo or health. Once you clear out the courtyard with the BFG and enter the castle, you have to activate switches to open up a door to the throne room. It's about halfway through the castle that I realized the single level feels like it could have been an entire project on its own. Once you open up the throne room, shit heats up really quick. The final segment has you fighting through a corrupted UIC facility before plunging you back into the abyss from the beginning for one more big fight. It's a fantastic experience that wouldn't feel out of place as a final map in a classic WAD. It also does nothing to set your expectations for what's next, because no map in this WAD is anything like the last. Map 2 is a straight up haunted house that reminded me of Splatterhouse 3D. You start getting introduced to custom enemies, like these skeletons that pop up out of graves, or the ghouls that start swarming in from the forest. It's got such a fun, campy horror atmosphere, and the challenge level is pretty modest. The cyber demon in the basement was kind of mean, but otherwise it's a pretty comfy little experience. If you're starting to think that the cohesive theme here is horror, you're wrong. Take Map 4 for example, which is an atmospheric puzzle adventure through a forest. It's a beautiful change of pace, and it has some really fun little brain teasers, but nothing too difficult or confusing. There's a platforming section near the end that I kept failing, but I think that's kind of on me. Map 5 is easily one of my favorites, maybe my favorite in the whole WAD. It has a winter theme, and it opens with some nice platforming sections. I'm not usually a big fan of platforming in Doom WADs, but the challenge level felt reasonable, and the view of the icy mountain against the red sky as you ascend is beautiful. It culminates in a big fight inside a castle made up entirely of custom enemies, and it really demonstrates how good the enemy selection is here. The queen bees have pretty nasty attacks that are fun to dodge. They're not overly tanky either, and they go down reasonably fast. Wave 2 has these flying mancubuses flooding in from the windows. The use of the skeleton enemies here was very compelling. They're simple enemies that just run towards you and use melee attacks, But they're decently fast, and when you have a huge horde of them like this, it can be really easy to find yourself backed into a corner or taking self-damage from the rocket launcher. Absolutely fantastic encounter. You genuinely never know what you're going to get with this one. Map 7 is literally Minesweeper. I love Minesweeper, so this is awesome. The deeper you get into this WAD, the more bizarre and abrasive it gets. I feel like I'm playing a surrealist adaptation of Dante's Inferno, descending deeper into the depths of hell with every successive level. By map 13, it starts entering borderline unplayable and incomprehensible territory, pushing the limits of not just your skill, but your patience and sanity. I genuinely think I could dedicate an entire video just to the final 4 maps of this WAD, as they're some of the most boundary pushing works the community has ever produced, and it would feel like an insult to try and summarize them here. If there's one unifying aspect, it's that they're all visually compelling, though sometimes in a very unconventional way. If you don't like the way one plays, you can always just skip to the next, since they're all designed for pistol starts. It's getting a more brief mention here because I may go over it more in depth in a future video, but for now I can say it's absolutely an experience worth trying. It's one of the most unique WADs ever made. I honestly didn't really enjoy anything about my time playing Grove, which might make it seem like a bizarre thing to include, but despite not having any fun, I still have a lot of appreciation for the WAD. It was released in 2004 by BPRD. For the uninitiated, BPRD is the man behind the infamous Nuts.wad trilogy, and he was a pretty influential mapper in the early 2000s. Right from the jump, Grove is a very visually impressive map, especially for the era. The blood red evening sky hangs above a mushroom forest that feels like something taken straight out of a fairy tale. The way the forest is completely swallowed in darkness creates a striking silhouette. It's all tied together by this simple little MIDI track. Even by contemporary standards, it looks great. Conversely, the actual design of the level is so obtuse and unpleasant that it makes it very hard to recommend. It's a puzzle map you need to solve by exploring the forest and finding 3 keycards. The problem is that right from the first challenge, you realize that this map's idea of a puzzle is just hiding something really small in a random location and forcing you to find it. You open the first gate by using this tiny book on the shelf in the cabin, collect the map, and start trying to figure out what to do next. You'll probably run around like an idiot for a while, possibly get killed by the archvile in the woods, assuming you don't get softlocked by jumping into the well, that is. Maybe stumbling around the dark long enough will lead you to finding the valve tucked in this corner in the pitch black, which raises the water all the way back in the well to get the shotgun. It only gets worse the longer you go. There's a cave with a bizarre symbol on the wall, and the solution is to find a tiny switch marked by the same symbol on the staircase. The only problem is that it's literally impossible to see at all because of how dark it is. There's literally no conceivable way of seeing it unless you turn the brightness up or enable mouse look. One of the puzzles in this WAD is literally just blindly feeling your way through a giant mess of trees you can barely see, bumping into stuff until you touch an invisible teleporter with literally no indication that it's even something you're supposed to do. It is genuinely terrible and barely even constitutes a puzzle. So why am I talking about it? For one, the modding landscape was very different when it released. This was a CAC Award winner the year it dropped, and I totally understand why. Much like how Nuts.wad represents the most extreme version of a slaughter map, something so outlandishly difficult and absurd that it pushes the limits of playability, I think Grove kind of achieves something similar in its approach to puzzles. The ability to commit wholeheartedly to a creative vision, even if it's very divisive, is something that makes Doom a unique platform for game design as an art form. BPRD is arguably the reason a lot of the WADs I've discussed today even exist. So many aspects of its secret hunting and interactive puzzle solving, things like being able to raise and lower the water, or the fact that the map looks like hand-drawn instructions giving you clues, are all massively influential in maps that would come out much later. Even if Grove fails to deliver its ideas with the level of polish you'd expect from more contemporary works, it was still a huge stepping stone for what we have now. That's pretty much it for this video. If you want to see more, you can check out the other videos in this series, or a recent video I made covering a Catgirl FPS made in the Quake engine. Thank you so much again for all the support this series has gotten so far. I've been a lurker in the Doom community for about a decade now, and it's nice to be able to contribute in some small way. I'm going to try to make sure there's less of a wait for part 4, so expect that at least within the next month. That's pretty much it. See you later.